The Doug Wright Show, where Utah news breaks on KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM and 1160 AM.
It's interesting, some of the texts and emails that we are getting right now. One person said, why do we vote at all? Why do we vote at all if it's ultimately these 538 people that make the decision? Well, in a very real sense, we are voting for those individuals, or through our votes, we are assigning those individuals our vote. And we are indicating to them, as the people that are designated as the electors of the state of Utah, we are, through our collective voting throughout the state, directing their vote on our behalf. So our vote indeed does very much matter. Now, in other states, they do it a little differently. In Nebraska and in Maine, it can break down. It can go by the congressional delegates. For example, let's just say that we had somewhat of a similar plan that either Maine or Nebraska, and I'll just keep it real simple. But, for example, maybe our two at-large votes would go to the overall state vote, who actually won the state of Utah. But let's say, for example, here in the state of Utah, let's say that one of the candidates won one district and another candidate won three of our congressional districts. Well, then theoretically, one vote could have gone to one candidate, five could have gone to the other. So some states have done that, but a limited number, only Maine and Nebraska. So never fear, your vote does count. I hate to see people get that attitude like, why do I bother? Hillary Clinton won by 2.5 million votes in the popular vote, but Donald Trump won with the Electoral College, and 538 people will ultimately have a say in that, and 270 of them will elect the next president of the United States. Your vote does count. It's just a little bit of a unique system that, honestly, a lot of Americans really don't thoroughly understand. We have our Lieutenant Governor on the line with us this morning. I greatly appreciate Spencer Cox being on the line. And Lieutenant Governor, welcome again to the Doug Wright Show. Good to have you here.
Thanks, Doug, and thanks for the civics lesson. It's great that people are getting informed on how the process really does work.
Well, I hope that was somewhat accurate, but the bottom line is, here in the state of Utah, this is something that just occurred to me because we just talked with one of the individuals who is coordinating the protests, trying to encourage electors to go rogue throughout the country, including here in the state of Utah. What would happen? Let's say today, 12 o'clock noon, you kind of gavel everything into session. You're presiding over our 6 electoral voters. What if one of them decided, the heck with it, I'm going to vote for somebody else? What would happen?
Well, it hasn't happened in the state of Utah. We don't anticipate that it's going to happen today, but we are prepared for such a scenario. We are one of 29 states that has a law on the books that says that the electors are legally bound to cast their ballot for the person that won the state of Utah. And so in case that were to happen, if someone were to cast their ballot in violation of that law, that person, I would immediately remove that person as an elector, and we have other stand-ins ready to step in case that were to happen. A new person would be assigned. That elector would then cast their ballot again in accordance with state law for the person that received the most votes in the state of Utah. So that's how we would proceed if that happened. Now, there is a legal challenge to that in the state of Colorado right now. There's been just an initial 3-panel. Wasn't a binding ruling, but at least that panel of 3 judges questions the constitutionality of those laws, but there is nothing yet, no federal ruling that would overturn those laws. So we will still operate as if those laws are constitutional.
I can never remember such a vigorous discussion on these issues in my lifetime, even when it was so tight between Al Gore and George W. Bush, and things ultimately went to even the Supreme Court over the Florida vote and the Chads and everything else, whether to finally just declare a winner there. And it's been interesting because you're right. It kind of has brought out the civics lessons in us all, because many times this isn't even on the radar. This isn't even discussed. On one weird hand, it's been kind of an interesting exercise in our democracy to learn all this stuff.
Well, you're exactly right, and especially when you talk about how rare it is. I mean, the whole faithless elector idea, it's incredibly rare. It almost never happens. I think there was one person ago or so was the last on record. But and most instances of it at all are more than a century ago. So it's not something that comes up. I think it's just another instance of the kind of hyper partisan world in which we're living today, where people are looking for any opportunity they can find to try to overturn an election that didn't go their way. And so I think that's why we're hearing a little more about it this time than before. But again, I don't anticipate having anything significant happen in the state or really nationally. I think this is much ado about nothing, but I think it is good to have the civics lesson and to remind people that we do have the system in place and remind them why we have it in place. I think all of those things matter.
Yeah, and regardless, the vote matters. Your vote matters, even if ultimately 538 people are assigned to vote on your behalf. It's our vote that selects those individuals and determines who goes on to vote on our behalf. And as you mentioned, sometimes when it didn't quite go your way, that can leave some people grousing a bit.
Yeah, there's no question that your vote does count, and it really does matter. And yes, you are technically voting for a slate of electors, but that slate of electors, again, in the state of Utah and 29 other states, is bound to cast the vote for the person that is selected by the state. And so while it's another step in the process, and again, I think an important step in the process, and I think important in the way that the number of electors is the same, which is, I know there's a lot of discussion about there if we should just go to the popular vote or not. But for small states like Utah, having Electoral College gives us a little bit more of a say than we would otherwise have. And so, again, I think it is important that people understand why why the Electoral College was put in place, and we can have that debate as whether it's run its course or whether we should continue to have it. But it is the law today, and I'm one that thinks it's a good thing, and so I'm excited to be able to participate in that little bit of history today, even if it is a little bit of a rubber stamp.
Our Lieutenant Governor is on the line with us here on the Doug Wright Show, Spencer Cox, and he will be presiding at this most important vote of our electors, but also participating in another very important event that is happening on Utah's Capitol Hill at 2:30 later on this afternoon. And Lieutenant Governor, I, along with so many, have been hearing the rumblings that maybe even this week, maybe even almost a Christmas Eve surprise, the 23rd of December is the date that I am hearing. I've talked with some in our delegation, but boy, talk about a united front of which you will be part of today at 2:30 on Capitol Hill. Tell us what's going to unfold regarding concerns about 1.9 million acres of the state of Utah being set aside in a last-ditch Christmas Eve practically surprise by the president.
Well, it is something that we're very much concerned with, and there's been a lot of coverage of this over the past week, past several months, and really years. But this is an attempt to bring all the elected officials together, statewide elected officials, the local county officials in San Juan County, those areas that are going to be impacted by the potential designation of a national monument, a size of which is really unprecedented. And as the only statewide elected official that lives in and grew up in and represents rural Utah, it's important for me to be there. I've been a county commissioner. I've been a mayor in a small rural county where close to 70% of my county is federal land, and understand uniquely how devastating these types of decisions can be to the local economy, but also to the protection. Look, all of us agree that there is land there that needs to be protected, but this is the problem. This is not, unfortunately, the way that our country was set up, where one person unilaterally can lock up 1.9 million acres of land without any say by the local population, without any say by any elected officials from the state. This is just not the way it was intended to be. Even when you look at the law as it sits, it's supposed to be the smallest amount necessary, the smallest amount of land necessary. And you can't argue with a straight face that 1.9 million acres is the smallest amount of land necessary. And so it's important for the elected officials who represent the people of Utah to stand up and make our voice be heard, and that's what's going to happen today.
But when you think of this 1.9 million, and then you put it on top of the previous $1.9 million for Grand Staircase, and all of a sudden you're talking some serious real estate. You combine those two, and that's bigger than even Vermont. Any one of those two, 1.9, that's bigger than Delaware. It's bigger than Rhode Island by a long shot. And when you combine, if it were to happen, Bears Ears and Grand Staircase, we're talking bigger than some of our relatively substantial states.
That's exactly right, and these are decisions being made by people who don't live here, who haven't spent time here, who have never even been to Bears Ears, and that's a problem. And again, we're working with Congress. There's a great effort in place right now with many people at the table to work on making sure that we make these designations correctly, that land management is so important. Again, I can tell you that federal land management is not the panacea that many make it out to be, living in a county where the forests have literally been destroyed by mismanagement by the Forest Service, and which has led to so many more problems than when these things were managed correctly. And we feel like that can be done. We want to have the Native Americans themselves want a say in the management. This would preclude that, and our plan would allow them to have say in the management of it. And so this is better for the Native populations. It's better for the local population. It's better for the land itself. And again, we can do it correctly. The federal government back east doesn't know what they're doing. And we really feel strongly about this one.
It is amazing how many people make these decisions who have never set foot on that land. They have no clue. They have no idea. And so many Easterners that I talk to are just shocked when I say, do you realize that in Garfield County, about 10% is privately owned of that entire county? In San Juan, I think it's only 8%, isn't it, Spencer?
That's right, and you're right. It's amazing to me. I mean, I talk to governors, lieutenant governors across the country, and when I give numbers and show them, what we're talking about, they're blown away. They really have no that this is happening. It's so foreign to them, and they become our allies pretty quickly when they realize what's really going on. And so we have to continue to educate. Again, it's a terrible way to do it on your way out of office. And if it's done, we'll work in every way possible to roll this back.
And I'll be talking with Senator Lee. He had a meeting with Donald Trump, and it will be interesting to see what the possibilities of either rolling it totally back or trimming it. None of these have ever been overturned by another president yet, but they have been modified in the past, so there are all kinds of moving parts. And Lieutenant Governor, I know you're on a drive back to the capital city. I really appreciate you making time for us.
Thanks. It's always great to talk to you, Doug. Thank you so much. Merry Christmas.
And Merry Christmas to you. Spencer Cox, our Lieutenant Governor. And again, he will be presiding over the electoral vote up in room, what is it? I just had that here. What is it? 445, I believe. 445. That's where the actual vote will happen up on the Utah State Capitol campus today. But the event we were just talking about, the gathering of so many of the elected leaders here in the state of Utah. Our entire federal delegation will be there. Our governor, our lieutenant governor, the president of the Senate, the speaker of the House, county commissioners from San Juan County, and more will be on Utah's Capitol Hill at 2:30 to really put forward a united front for the president, for the nation regarding Bears Ears. We have much more in store for you, and I'd like to hear from you. KSL Talk is our number, 575-8255, either talking about the electoral vote in your heart of hearts. Would you like to see somebody go rogue? And what about Bears Ears?
From Doug's analysis, we jump into Utah's new news, and then the all-new JMAC News Show at 12:30 on KSL News Radio.